how's it going? So today we're going to be doing a recap and review of season 2 of House of the Dragon. So basically the format for this video is going to be that I'm going to go through each episode by episode, and talk about the main plot points that happened, and I'm going to be looking at it from the perspective of both the green side and the black side, so at the end we can do a review then of everything that's happened throughout the season, and maybe talk about some stuff that happened externally during the film process, and consider these things whenever we're looking and passing judgment over how the season was as a whole. So episode 1 was called A Son for a Son, for obvious reasons, because we got blood and cheese in this episode, and because that wasn't specifically referred to as blood and cheese throughout the actual season. This is the event that happens at the end of the episode where Prince Jaehaerys is beheaded by blood and cheese, for the show only watchers. Although I know a lot of the people here viewing already do not need that clarification to be made. But essentially in this episode, so I'm going to start off from the black perspectives here, pretty much because that's where the episode starts off. So throughout this video, the majority of the time that I start off with either green or black side, it's because the majority of the start of the episode deals with them. This episode opens with the Raven flying through the north, and we meet up with Jace, and he is meeting with Cregan Stark at the wall. He secures 2,000 greybeards for the cause, and we also hear that he secures the Eyrie, although this happens off screen, which is a shame because it would be nice to have an interaction between he and Jane Arryn, but sure. And he finds out about Luke's death and returns to Dragonstone. Following this, Rhaenys returns from patrolling the Gullet with the Velaryon fleets on Melees, and we see an interaction where Daemon goes out and suggests to Rhaenys that she is to fly to King's Landing with him, and that they're going to finish off Aemon and Vhagar right then and there. Rhaenys dismisses him. She doesn't take order from him, she takes order from the Queen. And catching up with Rhaenyra, we hear that upon hearing of Luke's death at the end of season 1, she went out to Storm's End, and we hear that she has spent the last 10 days looking for her son's body. While she is out looking for his body, we see that she discovers Erax's wing and Luke's cloak has washed up on shore, has been caught up in a fishing net, and then we see the black side hold a funeral for Luke. We then see her return to the Black Council after her long absence, and she says one line in this whole episode, and it is in this scene she says, "I want Aemon Targaryen." Daemon then arranges for blood and cheese to occur, and this is done in collaboration with Miss Arya, who was seized trying to flee King's Landing aboard a ship that the Velaryon fleet boarded. And then we go over to the green side and what they have been doing in episode 1. So we witness Aegon's attempt to be king, and he is surprisingly well-meaning, albeit ill-equipped and maybe misinformed as a ruler. But he does listen to the petitions of the small folk, he does try and be a good king. We see him bring his son to court because he's trying to teach him the ways of the small council. And all in all, this is quite redeeming for his character, considering how much we disliked him in season 1. Also, Tom Glencarny did an amazing job. Then we catch up with Alicent and Kristen Cole, who is under her dress. And we find out about their affair that has been happening since Viserys' death. We witness Aemond secretly battle planning with Cole behind the back of the Green Council, despite the fact he is somehow sitting on the Green Council, despite having no role there. And then we get the blood and cheese scene, where blood and cheese enter the Red Keep via secret passages, and they take the head of Aegon's son, Prince Jaehaerys. Now, they were sent in to the Red Keep under the instruction of Daemon, who met with both of them and said that he wanted Aemon Targaryen to be the target. But when they ask, well, what if we can't find Aemon Targaryen? We get the suggestion that Daemon says a son for a son. And so Prince Jaehaerys loses his head in front of his mother and his sister. Helena then flees the room with Jaehaerys, and she runs to Alicent's room and walks in on Alicent and Cole coupling. So episode 2 is titled Rhaenyra the Cruel, and naturally we pick up with the Greens following the events of Blood and Cheese. They are running up all the small folk in the Red Keep, and they're trying to essentially secure the building to see, how this has occurred. Following this, we get a scene of Aegon destroying Viserys' model of Old Valyria, and he is essentially demanding retribution and revenge for what happened to his son, that he is going to wreak havoc on Team Black. He is very outwardly expressing his grief and rage. So then we go to the Green Council, and they are trying to strategize on how they should respond to this. Otto pushes for a propagandaic public funeral for the young Prince Jaehaerys, and for a procession of his beheaded body to be paraded through the streets, declaring that this is the work of Rhaenyra Targaryen. And this does go ahead despite the objection of both parents, Aegon and Helaena, and also the disgust of Alicent, despite her then turning to participating in this plan. Then at the end of this council scene, we find that they have caught Blood, trying to escape with Prince Jaehaerys' head. And he is in the cells. Larys has got him there, with all of his torture instruments of the day. We then get the funeral procession scene, and the small folk are outwardly sharing in the royals' grief and offer their condolences while mobbing the funeral cart, and Helaena has a panic attack in this scene. She is clearly very overstimulated. God love her. We then see Larys in the dungeon extracting information from Blood, who gives up that his accomplice was a rat catcher within the Red Keep, and Larys then allows Aegon to beat Blood to death. We are then to believe that at some stage he orders for all of the rat catchers in the Red Keep to be publicly hung, and the small folk mourn. Cole, in his guilt for not actively being on patrol and allowing this to happen under his nose while he slept with the Dowager Queen, then commands Auric Cargyle to go to Dragonstone and impersonate his twin brother Eric Cargyle, who's in service of Queen Rhaenyra, and attempt to assassinate the Queen. We then see the brothel scene with Aemond and Sylvie, where Aemond is discussing the fact that he regrets that business with Luke where he murdered his nephew. And Sylvie reiterates the fact that when incidents like this happen amongst the royals, it's really the small folk who suffer. We then see a scene where Otto confronts Aegon, who's in the room with Kristen Cole, about the hanging of the 100 rat catchers in the street and how the small folk mourn. He talks about how all of the sympathy that they garnered in the propagandaic funeral procession for the young Prince Jaehaerys has all been squandered because Aegon has decided to hang all of these rat catchers, who were all sons and loved ones of the small folk. It is in the scene that Otto then finds out about Cole's decision to send Auric to Dragonstone to try and assassinate Rhaenyra. He then lambasts the pair of them for being very foolish and these ideas being very ill-conceived, and Aegon, in his grief and anger, dismisses his grandfather as hand and instead hires Kristen Cole as his iron fist. So we then catch up with Team Black, and Rhaenyra is absolutely horrified at the Black Council upon hearing of this news and what happened to Prince Jaehaerys, but also the disgust that she is being blamed for it, and as accused she rebukes this and says, you know, I've just lost a son of my own, why would I ever do this to my own sister, and she is only innocent to the Greens. Immediately upon hearing the news of Prince Jaehaerys' death and the brutal manner of it, Rhaenys immediately looks at Daemon, who is sitting at the table smirking, clearly showing no remorse whatsoever, and in the next scene we see Rhaenyra has obviously copped onto this too, and we get this massive confrontation between Rhaenyra and Daemon, who fight over the incident, and he denies, saying that it was a mistake, that he wished for Prince Aemond's head to be brought before them and not Prince Jaehaerys'. And this conflict is hailed one of the best scenes of the season. It eventually blows up and he leaves the situation and flees on Caraxes to take Harrenhal, because he is obviously very insecure and looking to prove himself, and is very annoyed that his wife is contesting his actions so far. Rhaenyra then speaks with Miss Arya, who was in the cells after helping orchestrate Blood and Cheese, and Rhaenyra initially denies her freedom, but later in the episode we see that she decides to fulfill Daemon's promise to Miss Arya. We see that this is then quite beneficial for her, considering that Miss Arya is being escorted to the ship, and she had just been escorted by Eric out of the castle, and on the way down the hill she sees Auric walking up from the shore, therefore knowing it was not his twin. And so she goes back and warns Eric Cargyle that his brother is on Dragonstone and probably intends to cause some harm to the Black Queen. We then see Eric Cargyle go and attempt to assassinate Rhaenyra, be interrupted by his brother Eric, and we get the Cargyle twins duel to the death. Eric prevails in killing his brother and slaying his brother, but he then decides to kill himself because he cannot live with having killed his twin brother. It's also notable that in the last 2 episodes we got an introduction to the dragon seeds. So in episode 1 we were introduced to Hugh, who was petitioning the king. In this episode we got Ulf when he was going, and we see him steal some food off the cart and then see the rat catchers being hung. And then we also get introduced to Adam. So episode 3, The Burning Mill, otherwise known as Moondancer the Magnificent's debut, featuring Simon the Diva Strong. An amazing episode. Anyway, so basically we start off with a conflict between the Blackwoods, who are black allies, and the Brackens, who are green allies, and the outcome of this conflict over the sake of moving some boundary stones is the Battle of the Burning Mill, which we see the outfall of, which is thousands of dead soldiers from each side and seemingly no winners. But supposedly the Brackens have prevailed, and we cut to the Greens, who are somewhat pleased about this, but also acknowledge the fact that it's difficult to consider this a victory when you look at the massive losses, which will end up being a theme throughout the season. At this Green Council scene, we see that Cole plans to lead a battalion of soldiers to the Riverlands to bend the knee of the black allies which are stationed there. Aegon also has to be deterred from attending on Sunfire because he wants to go out and participate in the battle. He again is filled with rage, and he is deterred mostly by Laris. There's a scene where Aegon is being fitted with armour, and Laris comes in suggesting that there are rumours going around that Alicent and Aemond want to rule in his stead, and so he suggests it is better for the king to stay in the capital and rule from the Iron Throne rather than participate in battles and risk himself. We also are introduced to Gwaine Hightower, who is perfectly smug, proper posh schoolboy. He arrives from Old Town and joins Cole and the army as they march out. And now we are introduced to the beautiful Moondancer, Bela upon her back. And in this scene, we see that she is out ranging. She is keeping an eye on what is happening in and around the capital, and she spots Gwaine and Kristen Cole and pursues them, chases them into the forest. And we see that Gwaine is humbled so quickly. We then get a scene of Aegon and his lickspittle friends, who he has now appointed to the King's Guard. We see them going into a bar. Again, Ulf is here drinking with his friends. We discover that he's allegedly a Targaryen. And then we get this scene with Aegon and Aemond in the brothel, where he mocks his brother very openly in front of everyone for still lying with his first, and mocks him, saying, Aemond the Fierce, but you still lie with your first. You know, this typical brother banter that is not going to pay off for him in the next episode. So then, over the Team Black, we get the Cargyle funeral, and during this, Rhaenys appeals to Rhaenyra for, you know, continuing to seek peace, and suggests that Alicent may be an avenue to this peace. Rhaenyra then decides that she's going to send Joffrey, Aegon the Younger, Viserys the Younger, Rhaena, Tyraxes, Stormcloud, and 4 dragon eggs to the Vale, with the intention that Joffrey and Tyraxes will stay there, and that Aegon and Viserys the Younger, along with Rhaena and the 4 dragon eggs and Stormcloud, are going to go to Pentos and stay with Reggio. And she does this fearing another assassination attempt, and that they would come for the children next. We also see her in this episode elevate Mysaria to a councillor, and we witness Daemon taking Harrenhal, and Simon Strong being so unbothered by the whole thing, he takes it relatively without bloodshed, except that one guy that was very unfortunate to stumble across him before Daemon got to that dining hall. And then we witness him have his first vision in Harrenhal, and this is of course of young Rhaenyra sewing the head back on Prince Jaehaerys, saying, I always have to clean up after you. This is then followed by him waking in front of the heart tree at Harrenhal, and Alice is there saying, you will die in this place. Thank you so much, Alice, for that. We then witness the Black Council kind of falling into disarray even more so, and they're essentially just pushing for dragons and suggesting that Rhaenyra retire to safety elsewhere, and she rebukes this, saying, you know, it's good that you didn't push further with that because it is treason. We then see Rhaenys defend her, and Massaria facilitate travel to King's Landing for a meeting with Alicent. Yeah, then we get this Sept scene where Septa Rhaenyra comes in with Sir Stephen Darkland, who escorts her from the shore to the Sept, and she goes in and tries to have this conversation with Alicent. They discover that this whole usurping was an honest mistake, a misunderstanding of a dying man's last words, and a misunderstanding of prophecy, and that's a lot for them both to reckon with, but Rhaenyra is still trying to fight for peace, and Alicent says it is too late, Rhaenyra. And then we get Rook's Rest, and so this is episode 4, called The Red Dragon and the Gold, and we're going to start off with Team Black, starting this open with Daemon in Harrenhal, and he is once again having a vision of young Rhaenyra, who is speaking to him in High Valyrian from the Iron Throne, and this scene ends with him beheading her and her crown falling to the floor. He then wakes, meets with Oscar Tully. He is annoyed because he wanted to treat with his grandsire Grover Tully, and because Oscar has come, he suggests to Oscar that he should put a pillow over his grandsire's face and speed along his inheritance. Always a wonderful politician, Daemon Targaryen. We then see Rhaenys and Alan have an interaction. She is wonderfully graceful in the whole situation and essentially suggests that Corlys needs to be better to his son. We then cut to Harrenhal for another vision, and this time Daemon sees himself as Aemond, complete with eye patch, Aemon's wig, whole get up, walking through the halls of Harrenhal. Interesting. Maybe we'll see some of that in season 3. And he then meets Alice properly. We get a proper introduction to the character. She gives an introduction to Harrenhal itself as a character, and it's very interesting. And this whole time she is grinding up what looks like some weirwood leaves, and then makes some sort of concoction and gives it to Daemon, who then promptly drinks it for some reason. We then cut to a scene where he's meeting with Willem Blackwood, and he is completely spaced out during this, and this is interspersed with visions of Laena. But we see a couple of scenes where the Black Council are without Rhaenyra because she is still travelling back from King's Landing, a boat, and they are very unimpressed with their behaviour, that she went and acted without consulting them. And when she does return, they chastise her for how silly of a decision this was, for how much she put herself at risk, and says essentially everything that the online discourse did about episode 3. She now acknowledges that she wanted to pursue peace, but she realizes now that peace is not an option, and so war is inevitable, and she agrees to send Rhaenys and Meleys to confront Cole and his forces, who are now marching on Rook's Rest, having just bent the will and knees, with the help of the King's Justice, of 3 of her supporting houses in the Crown Lands. Following this, we get the scene where Rhaenyra finally tells Jace the prophecy, and we kind of find out why she was willing to risk herself so much by going to King's Landing, because it's all part of the bigger picture. So, the Greens this episode. Alicent receives moon tea and reckons with the guilt that all of this was her fault because of a misunderstanding, and she tries to talk to Orwell about this and tries to talk to Laris about this. We also get to see the effects of the moon tea and how much internal pain it causes. And we see Cole and his forces going around the Crown Lands and delivering the King's Justice. We see him beheading Lord Darkland, Sir Stephen Darkland's father, to see that he has submitted houses Rosby and Stokeworth. We also get a Green Council scene where Aemond embarrasses Aegon by confronting his shortcomings as king in High Valyrian, knowing right well that Aegon cannot fully speak High Valyrian given his mediocre response that leaves the rest of the Green Council looking kind of uncomfortable and embarrassed for him. And this is obviously a retribution for his slighting in the brothel, which occurred in the last episode. In the scene we also see Aemond discuss the plans for Rook's Rest that he has strategized alongside Cole, and we see that Aemond is going to meet them to assault the castle. Aegon then, scorned by his brother, council and mother in subsequent scenes, gets drunk, naturally, and flies the beautiful and lovely boy Sunfire out to meet with the army at Rook's Rest. We then get the Rook's Rest battle. Sunfire is felled and Aegon is maimed by a combination of their conflict with Meleys and also the absolute roasting they got by Vhagar's Dragonfire. Meleys and Rhaenys are killed, again by Vhagar. The castle walls are breached when Meleys falls on top of them, And Cole finds Aemond about to potentially commit fratricide and regicide, allegedly. Alright, so episode 5, Regent. We start off with the Greens, and they parade Melius's head through King's Landing, and the small folk are horrified, naturally. Aegon is brought to his room, and the maesters attend to him, cutting off his armour and trying to treat his wounds, and Alicent questions his condition. Alicent questions Cole on Aemond's role, and Cole refuses to comment, instead displaying very graphic signs of PTSD symptoms. We get a Green Council scene where they are talking about the fact that they will need a regent in Aegon's absence from the council, and Alicent offers herself as regent, having already had experience of this during Viserys' time, but she is overlooked by every member of the Green Council aside Orwell, including Larys and Cole, who she has previously been engaged with, and they instead choose Aemond as Aegon's successor, who is naturally a successor now in a way, given that his heir is dead. The Prince Regent criticises Larys for the fall of Harrenhal. He sends for the Lannisters to start making their way, and he demands that the city gates are shut to prevent a mass exodus of the small folk, who they need as human shields and also to supply arm and armour their war machine. He also gets the Ratcatchers cut down at long last. We see Alicent and Cole's relationship deteriorate, given the fact that he did not support her claim in the council scene, and he claims that he has spared her since he knows of the War of Dragonfire, and he doesn't want her to feel the guilt of that, which I kind of believe. We then get a scene where the throne is calling to Aemond, and he turns around to see Helena standing behind him, who asks, "Was it worth it?" suggesting that she knows exactly what he did. So we see Team Black mourning Rhaenys, and we witness the conflict in the council now that they have to essentially re-strategize because they've lost a dragon and a dragon rider. We are introduced to Jane Arryn, who expresses that she's unimpressed with having been sent such a small dragon to defend her castle, because she promised 15,000 men and expected something more substantial, which is quite reasonable. We then see Rhaenyra turn to Mysaria to strategize, and they decide to send Alinda to King's Landing. This is where we get the Daemon sex dream with Alyssa Targaryen, his mother, and this is followed by a meal with the Strongs, where they plan to rebuild the castle and how they're going to finance it. Jace then visits the twins after a conversation with Baela, and he secures the Frey alliance, and so the Greybeards marching from the north can now use the phrase twins as an easier and quicker passage to where they need to be. Alice condemns the crimes on Brackenland to Daemon and illustrates that the suffering always is inflicted upon the weak and the woman, and she also reminds him how this is going to reflect on Rhaenyra, and that he should really be here fighting for Rhaenyra's claim, but it seems that his selfishness and narrow-mindedness, his tunnel vision, is coming through, and he starts to express that he would like to sit the Iron Throne and she can join him at his side, which, you know, again trying to illustrate this idea that he potentially wants to start fighting for his own claim. We then get that really intense Corlys and Baela scene where she comes to offer him the hand of the Queen Pin, and he starts to talk about how it's an insult, essentially, because Rhaenyra has taken so much from him and still expects more. And Baela rebukes this, saying, "Listen, you have to stop blaming everything from her. My mother died by dragonfire, my grandmother died a dragon rider's death, and I myself want to die the same when my time comes." And he obviously sees a lot of his daughter, a lot of his wife in Baela in this moment, and offers her Driftmark, to which she refuses and says, "Driftmark has to pass to Salton Sea. I am of blood and fire." Rhaenyra then sends Alfred Massey to Harrenhal, and then we cut to Harrenhal, where the Riverlords are confronting Daemon about the atrocities and essentially are saying, "We are never going to swear fealty to a tyrant like yourself." Then we see in the library of the Dragonstone that Rhaenyra and Jace are plotting for the dragon seeds. They have all these dragons without riders. They have Vermithor, Silverwing, who are very large dragons, you know, very capable to fight in war, and they have no riders for them. And then they start talking about how they might find riders of noble blood within the Targaryen histories who have simply fallen out of the Targaryen line somehow. So we get the hatching of the dragon seed plot. This is a very key character introduction. And this right here, that's my son. Isn't he gorgeous? What a wee angel. Anyway, back to the video. Alright, and then episode 6, entitled Small Folk. We start with the Greens, and finally we get some payoff to Aemon's instructions that he delivered in the last episode, having become Prince Regent. We see the Lannisters march on the Golden Tooth and meet with Humphrey Leffer, and then decide that they're going to stay there and call Aemon to escort them to Harrenhal. And in the next scene, we go to the Green Council, where Aemon is absolutely disgusted at this request. You know, the audacity of the Lannisters, of course. We then see him send Jason's twin brother Tywin Lannister to treat with the Triarchy. Not jealous of him anyway. And we see him send Cole to Harrenhal. So we see him really thin out the Green Council in these last couple of episodes. He also calls Alicent back to speak to her, to have a word with her at the end of the council, and removes her from the council, saying that she has no place there. So he's clearly on one. Anyways, so sorry about the interruptions. My son's feeling playful. It's silly. Anyways, we later get a scene again in the Green Council where Larys is trying to pitch himself to be Hand, you know, doing the whole thing that he did to Aegon, where he's like, oh yeah, you know, Cole was Aegon's Hand, you need your own Aemond. And he starts pitching himself, and Aemon's like, absolutely not, go and summon Otto. We then see Orwell come in at the end of the scene and state that the king is now awake, and Aemon pays a visit to his brother, and he threatens Aegon into silence so that he doesn't tell anyone what actually happened at Rook's Rest. We hear from the scene with Alicent that there has been no word from Otto, and that the Beesburys have revolted against them for the death of Lord Beesbury. We then hear Alicent and Gwaine discussing Daron, who sounds like a lovely young boy, unlike her other two boys, who were raised by her in the Red Keep. Cole, Gwaine and company march for Harrenhal. Alicent and Helena visit the Sept to light a candle for Aegon, in hopes that this somehow appeases the gods into healing him quicker. And then they get told they have to leave the Sept, and they get absolutely accosted by all of the small folk who are rioting in the food riots because they've been starving for the past 6 episodes while the royals have been plotting a war. So Larys then pays a visit to Aegon, who is still abed but is now awake. He warns him of Aemon's wrath and suggests that Aegon should forgo Milk of the Poppy, and instead that he has to keep his mind sharp because he now has these physical ailments that, you know, with this commonality with Larys. Hey baby. And so he suggests that his mind is his weapon now. Anyway, if he would stop being such a distraction, but he's adorable. So, and on Team Black, and we get Daemon with his first and second Viserys vision in this episode. And so in the first vision, we see him in the throne room with King Viserys while he is being read out the riot act about the heir for the day quote and being disinherited by his brother. And this then breaks into a scene with the Strongs. When he finally comes out of this vision, he starts accusing Simon Strong of some sort of witchcraft and sorcery, which is hilarious. Then we see him attempt to flee Harrenhal, and in the process of this, he bumps into Alice in the Godswood. She ends up convincing him to stay, offering counsel on how to get the Riverlords on side, and then suggests that he waits 3 days and luck will turn. Stephen Darkland then attempts to claim Sea Smoke and is respectively smoked. God bless that man. God bless that man. R.I.P. He died a death. Corlys then makes Alan his first mate. And we also get a small clip showing that Rhaenyra and Mysaria were successful in sowing the seeds of chaos in King's Landing. Rhaena discovers evidence of a dragon in the Vale by finding a burned sheep pile with her little brother Joffrey, which she later confronts Jane Arryn on, since they have been misled, and obviously this is why they needed the dragon. We then see that the gift that has been arranged by Rhaenyra and Mysaria has arrived in King's Landing, being a fleet of boats all full of food parcels for the starving residents of King's Landing, who now see Rhaenyra cares for them even now. Then Daemon has his second vision of Viserys, where he is mourning over the death of his wife and son, And Damon has the realisation that he should have been there for him the whole time, maybe not out drinking and going to brothels with the gold cloaks. A bit late, but yes, valid. After he wakes from this, he finds out that Grover Tully has passed away, and he has quite an emotional response, obviously thinking about his brother. We then see Seasmoke chasing Adam down and claiming a rider for himself. Then we get this scene with Rhaenyra and Mysaria, where they're confiding in one another. Rhaenyra is doubting herself. Mysaria reassures her. They start to speak about their past, their history, and then they bond over personal struggles and kiss. We then find out from one of her Queensguard that Seasmoke has been seen with a rider. Rhaenyra jumps on Syrax and flies out to meet. Episode 7 starts immediately after this. Episode 7, called The Dragon Seeds, for obvious reasons. We start off with Team Black, and Rhaenyra meets with Adam, and he stands with Seasmoke, but bends the knee. She then takes him back to Dragonstone with her. Mysaria pushes for non-noble dragon seeds because Rhaenyra can't wrap her head around this whole situation that he is common-born, even though he's kind of not, but he kind of is. And so Mysaria pushes this idea of non-noble dragon seeds, which we then see Rhaenyra submit to. Daemon meets with Oscar Tully again, who has called the Riverlords and his bannermen, his vassal houses, to discuss their allegiance with Team Black and their allegiance to Queen Rhaenyra, in spite of the fact they do not like the representative that she has sent to Harrenhal. But Oscar Tully eventually wins over the hearts and minds of the Riverlord, and they swear fealty to Team Black. And in the process, Daemon has to behead Willem Blackwood for the atrocities that he committed. Daemon has his final Viserys vision straight after this, where Viserys is sitting completely disintegrating into the atmosphere, and he is holding his crown at the edge of Daemon's bed. He discusses how the crown destroys anyone who wears it and asks him, does he still want it? Corlys goes to speak with Alan in the shipyard, his new first mate, and he's talking about how Adam has claimed a dragon and that they're still looking for dragon riders, and essentially offers to Alan that he could go and try out for this. But Alan, in the words of Miss Beta herself, says that he is of Salton Sea and he wants for nothing more. We then see Rhaenyra's children, extended children, leaving the Vale. So they're going for the Gay Abanton to go over to Pentos, since Reggio has said that they can come and stay with him. And we see Rhaena break away from the crowd and go off to chase this dragon in the Vale. Jace and Rhaenyra then have this conflict, this contestation about giving non-noble folk the opportunity to ride dragons. And he is contesting it, saying that if illegitimate Targaryens can ride dragons, it brings his legitimacy into question further, because his claim to legitimacy has always been that he can ride a dragon, and so he is obviously true-born, but he obviously knows that he's not. And we finally get this confrontation too about his parentage to Rhaenyra, where he says, when you took Simon Strong to bed, did you think I would favour him? We then see Alinda bring the dragon seeds from King's Landing with the help of Alan. The dragon keepers unionise and stage a walkout, and then Rhaenyra gives a cult-like speech to all the dragon seed aspirees, and they are taken down to meet Vermithor, who torches the vast majority of them. But we see Hugh successfully claims Vermithor, and then we see Ulf drunkenly stumble into a clutch of eggs in Silverwing's lair while he is trying to escape from the dragon pit in the Dragonmont. But for some reason, Silverwing thinks this is endearing, and he claims Silverwing. We then see Ulf and Silverwing joyride over King's Landing and provoke Aemon to follow them to Dragonstone. Whereas on the green side, we have Larys and Ironrod discussing the fact that Seasmoke has supposedly claimed a rider, and Ironrod is like, oh, maybe you want to offer this information to Aemon to win his favour. And Larys is like, no way am I going to offer that questionable information up to Aemon. And then we have Aegon, who is trying to relearn how to walk with the help of Maester Orwyle and Larys, and he is very much struggling. We then have Alicent's scenes out in the wood, where she is in the Kingswood, and she is having this suicidal rebirth ideation thing where she's camping in the woods, she goes under the lake and she floats in the lake, and this is split between two scenes. Then see Silverwing and Ulf crash the Green Council, to which Aemond pursues on Vhagar, and Aemond is forced to flee upon seeing Rhaenyra's new dragon riders and dragons. And then we have the season finale. So episode 8, The Queen Who Ever Was. Here we start off with the Greens, who we departed with last episode, and we see that Tyland meets the Triarchy and he has to negotiate with them. He agrees to give them the stepstones, basically in payment for their allegiance. Then we get a clip of Aemond after he has burned Sharp Point in a fit of rage, and Vhagar looking all riled up to keep going with her campaign of anarchy. And then we get another scene with Larys and Aegon, and they're very interesting dynamic, and Larys urges Aegon that they should flee King's Landing and that it's in his best interest, that now in this fit of rage, now that Aemond knows that Rhaenyra has these new dragon riders, he is absolutely and utterly enraged. He is incensed, and Larys is like, you're in danger being here and your brother might come for you next, knowing that you're the only thing that stands between him and the crown. And he suggests that they flee, that he has the money of Harrenhal in the Iron Bank of Bravos, so he is suggesting that they flee to Bravos together. So then Aemond comes back to the Red Keep, and he goes in, and Alicent and Helena are having a conversation. Essentially, Helena doesn't understand why the people hate them, that it's not their fault that the blockade is happening, which kind of calls on the irony of the fact of the food parcels, because obviously we know it's Rhaenyra's blockade, but the royals are being subject to the citizens' rage. But Aemond comes in and he tries to force Helena to ride Dreamfire into battle and drag her down, and he is chastised by Alicent for this. And then she asks Orwell for secret passage to Dragonstone. Then we go over to Team Black. We start off and Rhaena is looking for a sheep stealer, naturally. We see some conflict between Jace and Ulf, seeing the start of this fracture in the difference between these lowborn illegitimate Targaryens and the highborn illegitimate Targaryens, who've been very slighted by the presence of Ulf and Hugh. Then we have a scene between Corlys and Rhaenyra, which is long overdue, and we find out that the sea snake ship is repaired and has been renamed the Queen That Never Was, because everything he does now is for her. We then see the conversation between Daemon and Sir Brum, who finally shows up to Harrenhal, and this conversation is essentially Alfred Brum being like, Rhaenyra has faltered while you've raised an army, and so he's essentially saying that Daemon should pitch himself as king. And Simon Strong overhears this, and the diva he is, he goes and sends a raven immediately to Rhaenyra. We get a lovely scene between Baela and Jace. They've had some nice scenes this season, and she says that she doesn't care about his parentage, that it's probably more common than he thinks, and that she urges him to join Rhaenyra's side in this meal with the dragon seeds that we then see. So in this dragon seed dinner scene, we hear Rhaenyra offer knighthoods to all of these dragon seeds should they go to battle with her and be successful. And she also suggests that now a deterrence is not enough and that they need to actually engage in conflict and battle. And we also get to see, again, this division between the classes, and also Ulf just being super disrespectful, which again, ironic, because he was sitting talking about how Rhaenyra was the true queen and Jace was the true-born heir only a mere matter of episodes ago. We then get another scene in Harrenhal where Daemon wakes and Alice is on the edge of his bed, and she suggests that he is ready now to go down and have the ultimate vision. So she takes him down, he puts his hand on the weirwood, and his hand is covered in the blood / sap of the tree, and he receives this final prophetic vision that is of everything of the Song of Ice and Fire. So he sees Bloodraven, the White Walkers, Daenerys, the Death of Dragons, the Comet, him falling into the God's Eye, everything. He sees it all. And then at the end he snaps out of it because Helena is there saying it's a story, he knows his part, that he has to play, whatever. And then we have Rhaenyra arriving at Harrenhal, and Daemon reaffirming and swearing his fealty to her, and having all the Riverlords bend the knee and cheer in a chorus in her favour, that they are all going to go and fight for her. Corlys and Alan then have a confrontation, essentially talking about how they've had to toil because he refused to acknowledge them, and he only acknowledges them now because his true-born son and heir and his family have all passed away, and so it kind of sets up that there is not this strictly obedient dynamic between the pair of them, that he's got the resentment in him. Alicent arrives at Dragonstone and Rhaenyra meets with her, and Alicent agrees to give over Aegon so that Rhaenyra can take his head in front of the crowd for his usurping, and that she can ascend the throne with little contestation. That Alicent basically says in Aemon's absence she can take the castle, that she'll tell Helaena, let down the castle walls, let Rhaenyra in, let her take the crown bloodlessly, and essentially all we have to sacrifice is the head of King Aegon. That brings us to our final close-in montage of the season, which is all the armies marching to battle and all the ships sailing to sea. And so we have Corlys and Alan and co heading towards the Gullet. We have Tyland and Shakaro Lohar with the Triarchy forces all going to the Gullet. And then we have all of our armies marching. So we have Cole and co marching to Harrenhal. We have all the Riverlords stationed at Harrenhal, preparing to march on the capital. And we have the Starks marching down through the Twins, the 2,000 Greybeards. And we have the Lannisters who are marching towards the Red Fork with the folks from the Golden Tooth, the Leffers. So everybody's in motion. Also, we've got the Hightower forces coming from the Reach with Targaryen flying in tow. So everything is being set up. It's all being set up for season 3. And obviously that's been one of the biggest complaints of this season, is that it feels like a trailer for season 3. And I agree to an extent, but at the same time we do have to acknowledge that, like, even the original series did this, where they had their big episode be the second last episode and their last to be kind of tying up loose ends and setting up for the next season. They said that there was going to be 2 big massive sequences, like big spectacular sequences, and obviously that was going to be Rook's Rest and the Dragon Seed scene. And I think people were confused because they thought that they were both going to be battle sequences, and so they didn't realise that the Dragon Seeds was supposed to be the second scene, which it was. But I thought that was a spectacular scene. I think it's easy to get lost in battle scenes and stuff, but giving us something like that really did just completely belittle the role of men in this whole thing altogether. And so I thought it was really interesting. But overall I really enjoyed the season. Again, it was like really, really nice getting to be super invested on it, because again I was like covering it on this channel, and so, you know, I was watching every episode like multiple times, like 2, 3, 4 times, one after the other on HBO. I really enjoyed the season, and I know there was a lot of criticism online. I think a lot of that criticism can be dealt with looking at the fact that obviously there was the writer's strike that affected it, and obviously they spent 8 months writing this season, and then it was immediately, you know, the second they were about to start filming, that the writer's strike was about to hit, they were basically demanded by their parent company that they had to lop off the 2 episodes at the end. And so they unceremoniously had to cut 2 episodes, and because I think they had like 1 month before the writer's strike started and it was like pens down, they had like virtually no time to redo any scripts, to do, you know, live rewrites while they were on set. If anything wasn't working properly or wasn't flowing the way that it should have been, or, you know, was a bit clumsy, was a bit awkward in scenes, and, you know, stuff that was improvised, like that scene between Rhaenyra and Mysaria, they couldn't really do much setup for that because they, you know, couldn't account for it because, you know, writer's strike, they weren't allowed to, and it would have been going against their union, it would have been breaking the packet, like you just can't do it. But I'm gonna make that into a whole other video, because I think everybody that's in the community really needs to be kicking up a fuss that we need 10 episodes for the next 2 seasons, because it's going to end at season 4, and if we only have 16 more episodes to cover the vast majority of the Dance of the Dragon and all the battles, I think they're just going to have to either leave ones out or rush through them all, or it's going to be literally like a battle every other episode. So I think what we really need to do is we need to get on Zaslav, we need to get on HBO, we need to like be on their case demanding 10 episode seasons. And I think like everybody needs to be saying this, we all need to be making videos about it, we need to be making posts about it, and so I'm going to be making a separate video about that. overall, I really enjoyed the season. I thought it was, it had its spectacle, it had its high points, it did have its low points as well. There were some writing decisions that I didn't necessarily agree with, but again, writer strike. So there wasn't very much editing that could be done. But I also am willing to acknowledge the fact that this was written by them in the first place, and so at some point they thought this was a good idea. So there's very much the opportunity and the chance that even if they had been able to make edits, they might not have changed these things. Who knows? Who am I to make claims about what the writers would and wouldn't have done? But overall, really enjoyed it. I think there was a lot of, introductions to new characters. They introduced a lot of new locations. They introduced lots of new armies. They introduced so many new dragons. We really did cover so much in the last 8 episodes, and I hope that having that recap at the start really illustrates we covered a lot. And even though some of it wasn't at the same caliber as others, I think the vast majority of it was very enjoyable. Even the stuff that was a bit questionable had its merit because it pushed the story along. Even the meeting with Alicent, look at that last meeting, people roasted that in episode 8, but it furthers the plot along. Rhaenyra is now going to go to take King's Landing knowing that Aemond is gone and that the gates are essentially going to be thrown open for her. But then we have the complication and the intrigue of, Aegon was offered up, his head was offered up by Alicent, he won't be there. Obviously we have a lot of cliffhangers going into the next season in terms of the battles. Realistically they're going to have to start in a battle because they've really set it up that all the armies are marching towards, could be the Honeywine, could be Red Fork, could be the Gullet, you know what I mean? There's so many. Could be the taking of Harrenhal. It could be the taking of King's Landing. There's so much that they could do right from the jump next season. But they've also set up so much, character intrigue with where's Otto? What's going to happen with the whole Larys and Aegon aren't there whenever Rhaenyra shows up? What's happening with Sheepstealer? Is, there's a lot going on. And in terms of the Dragon Seed complications with Jace, and there's a lot of character relationship stuff that's going on here. I think it's going to be really interesting whenever we get to see a bit more from Cregan Stark, hopefully next season, because he's such an interesting character and there's so much more can be done with him. I mean, I don't really know how I feel about the fact that they've left open the whole Nettles situation, just because the fandom were literally in a state of mourning for 8 episodes as soon as they started realising that there was some legitimacy to the earlier claims and leaks that they were going to merge Rhaena and Nettles, and the whole fandom was fully in mourning. And now they've just kind of left that open, and I don't know if that was a last minute thing where they went in and just snapped it out of the episode, stuck it in the cutting room floor whenever they seen the backlash that was happening over the first few weeks of episodes, so that they can leave it open-ended and potentially try and work around. I mean, I'm not holding out any hope, but yeah, no, I feel like maybe they should have just closed that book and just had her claim Sheepstealer, just so that people don't be sitting for the next 2 years with their hopes high. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but it just feels like a mercy kill, a mercy killing of the fandom's hope. You know what I mean? Just get it over with, rip a band-aid off. But yeah, no, besides that, I thought there was so much good. I thought the introduction of all the dragons was absolutely amazing. We got to see so much of the dragon personality develop. We got to see all the different dragon designs. It was amazing. The concept designers, unreal. All the concept artists have really pulled it out of the bag this season. All the costumes were absolutely amazing. Acting was great. The development of these different character relationships were very interesting. The locations were unbelievable. We actually got realistic travel time, which was nice. Yeah, and I thought the introduction of all these different books and stuff that they were reading from, and all the different sheets that Helena had pinned up, and every single one of them had all these drawings and writing on it, and all the books that were in the library and all the scrolls that they were going through, and everything was all handwritten out. I thought it was beautiful set dressing, but meaningful set dressing that you could actually look into and draw meaning from. I thought it was just amazing, the detail that they went into. And as far as the battle scene, absolutely remarkable. Seeing the dragons actually dance, getting to see a proper dragon battle, unlike what we've seen in The Long Night, where it was completely pitch black and you couldn't see anything. They gave us everything that we could have wanted at Rook's Rest. From the ground level, We get to see the colossal destruction that is Dragonfire, that is fighting on the ground when dragons are fighting above you and come down and step on hundreds of your men. Doesn't matter what side they're on, you know, it's indiscriminate whenever it comes to dragon fighting. And then I thought this was again so apparent in the dragon seed claiming, because it did not matter if they had a drop of Targaryen blood in them. Vermithor was having none of it until someone really like stood up and roared back at him. It's so interesting. And then the way Silverwing was just like, yeah, sure, whoever, you know, I just want to go out for a joyride, I'll take whoever comes. It's so fascinating the way that they've gone and built up these characters within the dragons themselves, which is going to make it even more devastating when stuff happens to them. And I'm not going to enjoy the next season of the show. So we may enjoy this one while we have it, and we have most of our dragons still, because Melis's death, like literally, I couldn't go. I enjoyed it, and I'm so sorry to anyone that didn't, but I think people's opinions probably going to change a lot. I think people had lower expectations. It's not even lower expectations. I think people were just more skeptical going into season 1, and so they were pleasantly surprised whenever they actually enjoyed it. And so people kind of came into season 2 with like really high expectations, and then obviously there was all the like actual difficulty before they even got to airing the thing, with the writer's strike, with their just episode count, with their just like budget. They couldn't actually film the sequences that they wanted to film to end out on. And I mean, you can really see that episode 8 is supposed to be episode 8 of a 10 episode season. It's not supposed to be a season finale. I think it passes because, you know, again, we had all of the drama and the spectacle in the Dragon Seed episode just before it, so it does kind of go in that like typical Game of Thrones, like we have all the drama in the penultimate episode, and then the final episode is kind of more politicking. But, you know, again, it was meant to be episode 8 of a 10 episode season. They didn't get to rewrite the season. It was literally like you have a month to like maybe edit a couple of episodes, and I think they probably prioritized like 2, 4 and 7 to be like their big episodes of the season. And so I don't know, I think we do have to give them that grace. If we had waited any longer, like the writer's strike lasted 6 months, so if you wanted to wait another 6 months in the writer's strike and then another 8 months for them to rewrite, be my guest, but it's not for me. I would rather actually have a season, and it's still a good season, so it's not like they're giving us something that's not possible. I think we really need to be on the case of HBO that we need 10 episodes for this next one, because there's just so much content to cover. Like, they made 8 episodes out of like a handful of pages in Fire and Blood. So I think with the source material they had, it was really interesting. I really liked the Harrenhal visions. I liked every single one of them. I think the last one was very brave and a wee bit questionable, but whenever I actually seen it on scene and not just in like the little screen from a leak, it kind of made more sense to me. I think I preferred the episode 5 Alyssa vision before I heard that Daemon doesn't actually realise that it's his mother. I mean, you could kind of get that from the scene, but I was just very much like, do you know what I mean? So there was that to consider, and obviously I just wanted it to be a bit more psychoanalysis worthy than it supposedly was. But alas, we are still going to be making a psychoanalysis House of the Dragon episode video later on, so it's still coming. We're still going to talk about it. Yeah, I think that they're a really good addition, because otherwise, you know, like, what, we're just going to like not see him for a couple of episodes. Like, there's not much going on with him in the book. He's just raising armies, so it does make sense. And Harrenhal is also supposed to be a haunted place anyway, and also Alice Rivers is there, and we need that interaction between them. I think it was good. It worked for me. I liked Alice, also worked for me. Simon Strong, diva that he is, love him to death, and you know, it was really effective in building those characters for me. Obviously some other people are going to disagree, but it was very effective for me. Helena, absolutely wonderful stuff with their story. I wish we had have got more scenes with her, and I imagine that we will in the next season, because we kind of have to, now that we know that she's, you know, got all this insight. It only makes sense, and hopefully we start to see her, you know, engaging more in the magical side of things, in the discourse and the discussion. But yeah, hopefully we get to see more from Helena in the next episode, or in the next season, because absolutely loved her to death. Love the actress, love the character that they've created, and again, George R. R. Martin himself has said that Helena in the show is leagues improved from Helena in the books. You know, she's actually got a lot of characterization that she never had in the books. And obviously Moondancer season peak, absolutely love her, what an angel, can't wait to see more of her. Oh my god, the concept designer released like the original character design, and wow, what a beauty. I'm gonna do I'm gonna do a video drawing her sometime shortly. I might do it this week so that I can upload it next week, but I'm very excited about it. And our beautiful Mohawk baby, I love her so much. We all love her. Moondancer fan club. And so yeah, no, I really enjoyed this season, and I really enjoyed getting to cover it with all of you. And I'm gonna probably make a video on each of the characters' journeys throughout the whole thing, because obviously we see some massive character changes from episode 1 with all these characters to episode 8 with all these characters, and all the turmoil that occurred along the way. R.I.P. Mellies, love you so much. This has just been a very, very quick review, because obviously I've been giving my reviews throughout the season. If you want to have any more, and if you want to look at any of my more in-depth analysis videos for each of the episodes and each of the trailers and stuff, I give full reviews in all of those. But this is just kind of a roundup of the season, a recap. This is mostly a recap video, and will hopefully be useful in 2 years' time when we're coming back, and people need a refresher, you know, and a very quick outline of all the episodes is going to be here for people to refer back to, and myself too. And yeah, so I enjoyed the season. I really enjoyed covering the season with all of you and having all your input and getting all these conversations going in the comment section, and you know, getting this little community of handful of Moondancer fans together. So like I say, Moondancer fan club, elite as always. And anybody else that stumbles across this video or that's watching it before season 3, hi, how's it going? It's been lovely covering. So I'm probably going to do some characters and themes and locations and army analysis and looking at sigils and whatever for all the different characters and houses and locations and dragons that we've been introduced to. And that's all going to be coming up in the off season. So very much looking forward to it. Like I said in the last video, I put it in text on the screen, so if anybody was just listening to it, they won't have seen it, but I was talking about the new Dunk and Egg trailer. Also, my brother and his wife work in film and TV, right? They actually met on the set of Game of Thrones, right? My car actually has like one of the crew passes from one of the later seasons. Anyway, found out today, my sister-in-law is up working on Dunk and Egg. Of course she is. Anyway, but obviously I'm not going to have any information about it, and I'm not going to share any information about it. But I was saying in that last video that I had read A Hedge Knight and A Sworn Sword, and I'm going to read The Mystery Knight this weekend. I'm in Galway this weekend, so obviously I need some reading material to go and sit by the water and look over the Atlantic at Saltall and read about the world of Westeros. So I am going to be doing that this weekend, and then I'm going to be having reviews for each of those coming to you. But I was listening to the audiobook, it was suggested in the comments, and I am going to wait. Well, I have like a PDF of the book as well, but I have a physical copy that's on its way, and so I'm going to wait till I have the physical copy so that I can like go through it with a fine-tooth comb when I'm doing this review. So I'm very, very excited about it. The amount of sigil talk, oh my god, it was like every time you got someone's house name you got full details of their sigil. It was great. So that's on its way too, and yeah, there's plenty of other videos in the pipeline. There's too much to even list. There's a lot going on, but we have a lot going on, and that's very exciting. So we'll have plenty to keep us going in this 2-year off season. And until then, rewatch season 2 till you enjoy it. If you already enjoy it, welcome to the club, Moondancer fan club. Love you all, bye.